time for us to move on to tool number 4. And what I'd like to have you evaluate now is how well you use a variety of activities in your lessons. And so here's the statement that I am asking you to respond to, which is basically, my lessons always included a wide variety of engaging activities that enabled my learners to be active, not passive. They allowed us to use the textbook as a resource and not as a sole source of our teaching. And so I invite you now to go ahead and make your selection and submit your answers. In just a few moments, we'll get an idea of where people are at in terms of the variety of activities that are taking place. I had a question come in that I'd like to answer before we do that. Someone was asking, where do you get the battery-operated candles? And in all honesty, I don't go very far. I go over to the CVS or the Walgreens or places like that, and I can find battery-operated candles. They often have the little tea light ones, but you can also find a pillar candle. If not, certainly go online. And we know nowadays, if you can't find something in a store down the block, go online. But any place like that, you can certainly find a battery-operated candle. Well, let's go ahead and hear from Nick about what people are saying about their use of a variety of activities in their rooms. Go ahead, Nick.
Thank you, Joe. Again, the B answer, Steady As She Goes. Steve or Stella is the runaway winner. Second place, though, Leica Pro, Larry and Louise. So we have a group who's fairly confident that they're providing a good range of activities for their students.
That's very good to hear. Thanks, Nick. It is good to hear that people feel they're offering variety because if we're teaching kids especially, they need that. But even if we're teaching adults, I think having variety in our spaces and our lessons really speaks to the life of the gospel, the spirit of the gospel. I find it unacceptable for a kid to come away from my religion class thinking that religion is boring. We can't allow that to happen. And so variety, I think, is one of the ways that we can overcome that. Well, let me go ahead and tell you how I rated myself. And on this one, I'm going to go ahead and humbly give myself an A, like a pro, Larry. I can honestly say that my lessons involve a great deal of variety. And there's one very good reason for that, and that is that I tend to get bored quite easily. And so in order for me to be enthusiastic about the things that I'm teaching, I need to bring in a lot of variety. I need to bring in different ideas. And so even if I did an activity last year and it worked quite well, chances are when I do it in the next year, I'm going to be changing it or tweaking it, always looking for some way of adding a little twist so that we can spice it up for the coming year. Well, let's take a look at how we might be able to bring some more variety into our settings. And I'd like to offer a few suggestions. The first, and I'd like to do first is to share with you a little bit about my schedule for my classes and how I kind of build in variety. We usually spend the first 5 to 10 minutes just engaging in some small talk, a little bit of taking care of business and taking attendance. And then we move into our opening prayer. We take 5 or 10 minutes, inviting the kids to stand up, and we share a little prayer. We pass that candle around, and everyone offers a prayer of thanksgiving or a prayer of petition for someone. We then usually do a feature that I call the Song of the Week. I usually try to bring in a contemporary song that speaks to the theme that we're looking at. And this is, I call it my hook. It's the way I try to get their attention and get them hooked into the lesson using something they're familiar with from their own lives. And then we generally work with the text or the material that we're getting the content of that lesson across in about 15 or 20 minutes, really trying to make sure that the kids are learning some solid things about their faith, I usually then do an activity that's based on that. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes, in which we are trying to alternate and bring some variety. And then finally, we move into sacred space, which I leave about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for quiet prayer, in which I lead them in a guided reflection. Now, I show you this just to show that in my 75 minutes, I tend to break up my lessons into about 6 shorter segments, each of them about 10 minutes or so. So that in and of itself brings about some variety, because the kids know that we're not going to just be sitting still for 45 minutes doing any one thing. We're almost always changing every 10 or 15 minutes. But I also highlighted number 4 and 5 in red to show that those are a few areas where we can really bring in some more variety. And in particular, I'd like to draw attention to number 4, working with the text. And I'm going to offer some strategies for how we can work with a textbook, because let's face it, most of us are handed a text and are told we need to cover this. But I'd like to suggest some creative ways for kind of breaking out of that round-robin routine from reading from a textbook. So I have 3 suggestions for you. The first one I call paired interviews, and basically in this strategy you arrange the students in pairs and you assign half of the text to one of them and the other half of the text to the other student. And after they read those sections quietly, they then take turns interviewing one another using an interview sheet that you've given them ahead of time. It's a simple interview sheet that has questions such as, what's the main idea of your section? What are the key words? What's the most inspiring sentence you read? What's one idea from your section that all Catholics should know or do? So very simple questions. And then when they're done interviewing one another, you invite the pairs to share with the large group, reporting on what their partner has read. And then you have an opportunity to highlight and emphasize the most important points. So that's just one way of breaking up the reading of a text. Another suggestion I have is called a graphic organizer. And this is basically a worksheet that you can give to the students that helps them to identify and organize the information that they're about to read silently from a textbook. And a graphic organizer should just be something simple, a sheet of paper with 4 boxes, and each of the boxes has a title, such as big idea or ideas, keywords, most interesting idea, and something like which means questions that the kids may have. And as they read silently, they are to fill in information in that graphic organizer. And when they're done reading, you then use the graphic organizer to guide the discussion of what they've read. And finally, I'll share another idea that I've used in my classes to break up the reading of a text, and that is using clue cards. And in this strategy, what you do is you yourself look over the text ahead of time, and you identify some keywords and write those keywords on some small index cards, 1 word per card. And then you randomly distribute the cards to the students and explain that as they're reading the text out loud, as soon as they hear one of their own clue words being mentioned, they are to yell, "Time out!" And then they show their card to the class as you or a volunteer explains the importance or the definition of the word. And if a student fails to call timeout when their clue word has been read, well, that student has to stand up for the remainder of that reading, or whatever amount of time that you think is reasonable without being cruel or unusual punishment. So those are just a few ideas that I'd like to share with you for breaking out of the routine and bringing some variety into reading a textbook.